What's going on, everyone, and welcome to Movie Emporium's Flashback Reviews, where I take movies from the past, break them down, and tell you what I think about them. If you like what you see, as always, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. If you like any of these videos, awesome, hit that like button and comment below on any video you watch, including this one. So the horror genre in its own right is a very interesting, unique genre because anybody that's anyone that has any inkling of wanting to start out in the film industry, this is a good way to do it because horror films are most of the time extremely low budget films. There are very few films that cost more than a couple $1,000,000. It's a really fascinating genre, and it's for the reason that is because you can make a film like it and you can use interesting visual effects and you can use interesting ideas and kind of craft your own film. And horror films in their own right are so, they're more worried about getting into your skin, kind of warping your reality, kind of just making you feel kind of uncomfortable, that you don't need a lot of money to do that. Now, with that said, there are a few films like the one I'm going to talk about that, have a pretty decent budget because they have a lot bigger name actors and they have a lot bigger name writers and so on and so forth. But I love the genre. There's so many good horror films that I saw during the Night Stream Film Festival that are extremely low budget. Frank and Zed, I think, cost like less, like maybe $1,000,000 or something like that. It was really cheap, and it was one of the best horror films I've seen in a long time. But that's what horror in its nature, the horror genre, is really good at doing, is making great films on a very tight budget. So looking for also a very unique horror films, which is really hard to do a lot of times because in the kind of aspect of the seesaw effect when it comes to the particular genre, you might get a Get Out, but you also get like 16 other bad horror films. It's because it's such an easy genre to make films for. So to try and find a really truly unique horror film is really hard to do. So, but Stephen King, as we all know, is a very famous writer, written a lot of short stories, and a lot of his short stories he will sell to people for like $1, so on and so forth. So I don't know how much this movie cost to purchase the rights for, but this movie 1408 is a very interesting movie because it's a movie that has literally one main character in the movie, and that main character has to lift and kind of hold the weight of the entire movie on his shoulders. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is the short story for this movie is not very good. It really isn't. It's an interesting story because of the idea of like a room in a hotel, which hotels are always scary to begin with because of this nature of the long hallways and the quietness and so on and so forth. But it has a really cheaply, poorly put together ending that kind of ruins the experience, makes it very ambiguous and whatnot. So to adapt that into a movie is a little kind of worrisome. Like, how are you going to flesh it out? How are you going to make it more meaty? How are you going to take this character, Mike Enslin, and how are you going to make him a really realized character? And it takes, well-respected writers or somebody with a good grip and handle of taking short stories and making them feature films. You look at like Frank Darabont with like The Shawshank Redemption, or you look at, actually Frank Darabont with The Mist and stuff like that. It's a very hard thing to do. But with that said, this movie 1408 has a very interesting group of people attached to it. Mikael Håfström, who's the director of this movie, was the first director attached to it, so that didn't really need to be, there's not really much with that. But Mikael Håfström is one of those directors that hasn't really had a great career record. I mean, he's done stuff like Derailed and stuff like that, so his career is just not very great. So to bring him on 1408, I guess is fine. I mean, maybe they were just looking for a way to make some extra money, to make some money on this movie. But it's not a director that I had a lot of faith in making this movie because one, the source material is not that great, but the director's really not that great of a director. But they brought in Larry Karaszewski and Scott Alexander to rewrite the script from Matt Greenberg. And I remember reading about this on the feeds, like the IMDb stuff and whatnot. And then we heard John Cusack was, brought in as the main actor of Mike Enslin. And then Samuel Jackson was hired, and Kate Walsh was hired, but she couldn't do it, so they brought in Mary McCormack. And they brought in Tony Shalhoub. And I actually, when I read this, I'm like, oh, Oh, okay. This could be interesting because, Samuel Jackson, John Cusack in a movie together. I like both those actors. I think it could be fun. It's interesting. And then the first trailer came out, a few months later, whenever they put it out, a couple months before the movie came out. And I liked it immediately. I thought it was a great trailer. The second trailer was even better, and I got super excited for it. This became one of my favorite movies, or one of my most anticipated movies of the year. Unfortunately, I wasn't doing any type of review thing at the time, and I went to see this movie, and yeah, this movie delivers. And the reason for that is because of John Cusack. It's not Samuel L. Jackson, it's not Mary McCormack, it's not Tony Shalhoub, it's John Cusack, which is really crazy to say because John Cusack is a great actor, but he's not known for being that great, for being almost Oscar worthy. We have a character named Mike Enslin, and Mike Enslin is a man who has lost his child, has kind of left his wife to kind of, because he just can't handle the situation. It's kind of ruined his relationship with his dad. And to kind of heal himself, or at least, not wanting to kind of deal with the subject matter at hand, he goes around to different hotels, different places that have been considered haunted, that have had like violence happen in those hotels. He basically writes books for him, like top 10 books, top 10 this, top 10 that. It's kind of like the early days of like Watch Mojo or What Culture and stuff like that. And in the process, he's just debunked everything. It's just how he is, and he's able to find everything and so on and so forth. And he receives a postcard in the mail, and that postcard is, please don't come to New York. Do not arrive at the Dolphin Hotel. Do not go to room 1408. That's my only problem with this movie. Why would unless the hotel, the room is sending postcards out like an evil entity, it seems kind of stupid to kind of make yourself known to a writer who debunks, haunted places. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. And of course, Mike Enslin is going to want to go to this place. And so he, with the help of his, distributor, who is the Tony Shalhoub character, basically forced themselves into the Dolphin Hotel. And the Samuel L. Jackson character, the Olin character, is trying his best to not get Mike Enslin to go to this room because he knows what's happened to this room. And there's some really cool stuff. We really hear some really interesting stuff about it. It's really violent and really disturbing, but it's really cool to hear about what goes on in this room. But Mike Enslin, being the skeptical as he is, forces himself to get into this room and so on and so forth. Olin, is like, all right, you're on your own. And it basically leads into an hour and 10 minutes of Mike Enslin just literally going insane. Literally his room kind of warping his reality. And it's just a really, really cool horror film that does a lot of creepy stuff. I mean, this room is as disturbing as it gets. There are like things that are happening where the room is like starting to fall slowly apart. We're seeing like people that used to stay in this room going like jumping out windows and stuff like that. He tries to escape, and like every time he tries to escape, like because of how it's playing tricks on his mind and stuff like that, and how it's like warping his reality, he can't get out of this room, and it just becomes like a nature of a battle of one man versus an evil entity, because it's not a ghost. There's no ghost in this room. It's an evil entity of some sort. And it's a really interesting idea because when we see these things playing out, it's almost like it's a way for him to cope with the fact that he couldn't cope with his daughter. And I don't know if that's because of like how Stephen King and the writers were kind of putting the story together, but you really feel like that this room is trying to get him to realize his lot and his location and his ideas, and the fact that he can't just cope with the fact of his daughter, because there's an earlier situation where he has written a book that, when his child died, and this woman confronts him with the book, and he acts like he can't admit that he wrote this for his daughter, and so on and so forth. But the stuff, if you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. It's just really crazy. There's a point where he is like hit with a big wave of water, and he wakes up back in California, which is where this movie starts at, and he literally like imagines himself in California talking to his wife or ex-wife, writing the end to his book that he's writing, and just kind of that's the end. He feels like he's back into reality, when it's really the room playing tricks on him. I mean, the room just does all kinds of stuff between, showing him a news, showing him footage of his wife and kid, showing these people that were in this room, showing like the pictures on the wall change. It becomes really cold and freezing. It really becomes, a burned down shack. it's a really kind of cool take on the idea of the scary nature of hotel rooms, and to use Mike's fears of his not wanting to come to terms with his daughter dying, to not come to terms with everything that has happened to him. It really kind of plays into that whole idea of, why this room is doing what it's doing, how it's playing against his, emotions and stuff like that. So it's really just a creepy movie, and it does such a, and Mikael Håfström and his cinematographer do such a nice job with, just creating this atmosphere. You walk into this room and it's like, even Mike Enslin, he's like, this is the room, this is it. And then you start like watching, you seeing everything. You don't leave this room with Mike. You don't ever go outside the room, or if you do, it's part of the ploy of this evil entity in this room. And you really feel claustrophobic. You really feel like you're with Mike Enslin, and that's just like a really kind of that's what I talk about when stuff gets under your skin. That's when movies do, especially horror films, they do a really nice job of, getting into your psyche and trying to make you feel what the main character is feeling. And like, you look at stuff like Get Out and stuff like that, that's why these films are so well respected. This is one of Stephen King's adaptation movies, like one of the best movies that has been put out, for that particular reason of just the nature and comfortability of what you're watching, because you want to get out of this room, you want to get Mike out of this room, but like Mike, you're stuck in this room and you can't do anything. You're watching the horrors that are being represented. You're watching him have to confront his dad and confront him. It's so, oh my god, it like rattles your nerves and stuff like that. The thing about this movie that is really truly special, outside of just the movie itself, is the music that is used in this movie, the audio cues, the use of ambient noises and stuff like that. But I had a really interesting thing happen to me after I saw this movie, or close to about when after this movie came out, where I was working at a hotel. And there's a song in this movie by the Carpenters that We've Only Just Begun, which is played through pretty much the entire movie, which is very creepy. And there's a really funny thing about this song where it's not a creepy song. It really isn't. It's actually quite a very beautiful song to listen to. But after this movie, when it plays on the little clock radio, when you hear it throughout the movie, and it's very sinister when it's being played, the way it's kind of projecting to Mike Enslin, it becomes a much more uncomfortable song to listen to, a much more disturbing song to listen to. Every time I listen to it now, I think back to 1408, and that's kind of crazy to think about. And so I'm working at a hotel, and if you know me, you know which hotel I worked at for quite a while. And I was going to do my job. I worked as a bellman, and I walked into one of the elevator banks, one of the elevators itself. I'm going up and I'm pressing the elevator button, and all of a sudden I'm like, what the heck? The Carpenters' We've Only Just Begun is playing in the elevator. And I know this is a review of this movie, but that is a really kind of strange, kind of ironic, weird moment, because not only am I in a hotel, not only do I work for a hotel, which I've said is our very interesting, very creepy place to work at to begin with, but it's the middle of the night. I'm going up to a room, and it's just like, that song became even creepier. It's one of the creepiest songs I've ever heard, and it's not even a creepy song. And it's just it's the kind of crazy nature of what 1408 is, and it's just a very kind of unsettling movie. It does some really unsettling things, and like I said before, I read the synopsis, or kind of went over a little bit of the synopsis. John Cusack in this movie is absolutely, it's like one of his best roles. I don't know if a lot of people agree with me, but that it's close to an Oscar worthy role. It's really kind of powerful, because he's having to deal with so many emotions, so many things at once, and it's all being put on his shoulders. When you're sitting here watching it, you're like, this guy who has gone from having so much happen to him with his daughter and leaving his wife, and kind of having a falling out with his father, to becoming the skeptic, to eventually going to this hotel room, which contains an entity, which is everything that he's been fighting against, and everything is being kind of bled into him as the hour moves along, because the movie, actually most of the movie takes place in real time, but all these things are like impacting him. At first it's like little things, like pieces of chocolate, like the little chocolate pieces are put on the pillow. some weird thing has like put the toilet paper, you know, if you go in the bathroom, the toilet paper's been made, you know, to like the clock radio, and all of a sudden things start rolling and things start happening, and he's starting to go more and more insane. The level of acting, the level of detail that, you know, John Cusack is portraying on the screen, from everything from that small moment with the cigarette he always puts in his ear and stuff like that. It's very well done. It really is. John Cusack's giving a layer of emotion that is just fully realized in 360 degrees. You know, you watch him as he slowly kind of goes into madness as this room starts to slowly take over his psyche. And it's just a very well nuanced performance. It's one of those performances that truly doesn't get the level of recognition it deserves. It really doesn't. And it finally gets to its like whole true purpose. And then it finally like resets itself, so we're back into like a normal room with everything put back together, and it resets itself to basically what it's doing is it's trapping Mike into a loop where it constantly goes 60 minutes, so he's constantly going more and more insane, and he decides to put a stop to it. And so the movie finally resets itself, or the room resets itself to back to normal state, and instead of letting him go, kind of like, you know, you won the contest, it resets itself back to 60 minutes, because like I said, the whole room degradation stuff is 60 minutes, and he finally gets tired of it. The whole cigarette that he's been kind of holding on to throughout the whole movie because he doesn't smoke it, to the bourbon that was given to him, or scotch or whatever was given to him by Olin, this Samuel L. Jackson character, to just basically him going, screw it, we're going to get the end, we're going to put the end of you room and we're going to take you down, and he lights the room on fire. Now this leads to I think there's like 4 different endings to this movie, but the 2 main endings are he's rescued by the firefighters and lives, and, you know, kind of accepts the fact that maybe he was kind of losing his mind, losing his sense of reality. And then he plays the tape and his daughter's on the other tape, and so on and so forth. And then there's the one where he actually dies, and, you know, Samuel L. Jackson's Olin character tries to get the box to, you know, his wife, and then he takes the box back and he sees Mike Enslin in the car all burned up, and he listens to the track, and then we see, you know, Mike Enslin in the hotel room as it's like, you know, all charred and stuff like that, and he disappears to see his daughter. And it's really interesting. It's a very kind of interesting, it takes the movie into interesting dynamics, because one is like a happy dynamic, so it gives it much more of an uplifting story take. And then there's the downer ending, which people apparently in the test screenings really didn't like. But I like that downer ending because Mike sacrifices himself for doing something. Basically, instead of running away, he confronts the situation, and he lights a match and he dies, but he actually does what he never would do and doesn't run away. He actually confronts the situation, and it really, really does show his true emotion and his trying to reunite with his daughter and trying to accept the fact that he can't get out of the situation that he's in. And it becomes a much more satisfying ending, I guess you could say. And that's in the director's cut, so it makes it for a little bit longer of a movie, but a much more satisfying ending. So, but that's, you know, pretty much it on the movie. Like I said, Samuel L. Jackson's pretty good in the movie as Olin. He is the second lead actor in the movie, but he's not in it really that much. Mary McCormack plays his wife, and she's good. Tony Shalhoub's in it for a few minutes, and so on and so forth. But it's really John Cusack's movie. So, and with that said, the movie made, you know, $71 million in the States, $135 million worldwide. So it was a pretty decent hit for what it's worth. You know, I think it would cost like, you know, $20 million or whatever to make. But once again, it shows that when you actually have good writers and the director is given a good script, it has a competent vision, we can get a great story and a great picture and a great film. And on top of that, when you can focus the energy on making the unsettling nature truly unsettling and make it like a realistic idea, but kind of, you know, put in those horror elements, and you don't make it cheap, you don't make it like jump scares, it really can work as a film. And that's why, to me personally, 1408 is one of the better horror films that come out in the last 20 years, or one of the better horror films that come out in general, just for the simple nature of its, you know, its atmosphere and its ambiance, and the unsettling nature of the room, and just the fact that it doesn't go for cheap scares, and it really feels like a well-crafted, well-made horror film. So, but that's pretty much it. That's going to be my take on 1408. Like I said, if you haven't seen it yet, or if it's been a while, definitely check it out. Kind of go back into this world, you know, because I think it really does work on its own. It really does work as a great horror film. So, but anyways, let me know in the comments below what you think of 1408. Did you like it? Did you not like it? All that good stuff. Otherwise, hit the subscribe button and join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.